Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host, and I'm joined by the film encyclopedia man, Boaz Dix. We are a couple of filmmakers on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode we pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on VOD. Myself and Boaz pick our favourite film from that topic, or team up against a guest and battle it out to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 2. We are back for part 2, people. So, the Comfort Film Podcast, what is your pick for Stephen King adaptations?
The Shining.
The Shining.
The Shining.
Yeah, I mean, I know Stephen King wouldn't agree, but we think...
The Shining.
Yeah.
We think it's really one of the just ultimate adaptations of his work. When you ask us, we could have gone with something like Shawshank Redemption or Stand By Me, both of which are great movies. Yeah. But when we think Stephen King, we think horror first. And so,
yeah, definitely.
What did we think was like the ultimate choice? The Shining.
Yeah, because this movie's still scary. Sure. I saw this when I was a kid. I watch it now and I'm still terrified. Yeah. Stanley Kubrick's an amazing filmmaker. You have John Alcott, the cinematographer. I was reading about his process, by the way. Insane. So he read the book 10 months prior to when, they started shooting. And what he did is he started making these cardboard sets at home, these little miniatures, and then he would light them and he would shoot them with his camera to figure out the lighting. And then from there, they would go and they would make the real sets. All the real sets were made in advance. And Stanley Kubrick said, I don't want to see any lighting instruments. So all of the lighting in this is actually practical instruments. They had everything wired to hold enough power. They're actually using fluorescent tubes in some of the scenes, but they figured out a way with wiring that they could cut down and eliminate actually the hum. All the lights that you see in the Colorado room when they're going up the stairs, okay? It's like we see regular lighting behind, Wendy, but behind Jack Nicholson, all of these lights are turned all the way up because Alcott had like a control board where he could just turn it all the way up. And this is also, we have the guy that invented the Steadicam using the Steadicam in this. So it's just like, technically it's a marvel. Stanley Kubrick is an absolute perfectionist. He'll drive people to insanity with his takes, like 80, 100 takes, and so it's like whatever we saw in the end, we know 100% is what he wanted. And to have a film like that, even though it does go against the source material somewhat, it's just, it's a force of nature. It's still powerful. And I'll watch it again. I could watch it again right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Stanley Kubrick's process is so extensive, I think it's probably fairly well known. Was it the shooting lasted like a couple of years or something crazy? He always does a lot of lighting tests, as you said, John, on all his films, extensive lighting tests, extensive rehearsal periods until everything is spot on before they even run a camera on day one. So, Stanley Kubrick never leaves a stone unturned when it comes to any of his films. And I would say, The Shining is certainly one of the best horror films ever made, for sure. And, Stanley Kubrick is one of my favorite directors. And I just kind of love these directors that kind of do a lot of different genres. And you feel like with him, he's kind of mastered each one of those genres. And certainly with horror, there's no different there with The Shining. So what happens in The Shining, guys?
All right. So looking for a way to support his family while working on his novel, Jack Torrance, which is Jack Nicholson, takes a job as a caretaker of the Overlook Hotel, a remote resort in the Rockies that is snowed in for nearly half the year. Jack moves into the Overlook with his wife Wendy and their young son Danny, who has some telepathic and psychic abilities. As they're settling in, the Overlook's chef, Halloran, which is Scatman Crothers, talks to Danny about his abilities, which Halloran calls the shine or shining, and warns Danny to protect himself from the dark forces that infest the hotel. Left alone, the Torrance family quickly become victims of the hotel's permanent residents.
Da, da, da.
So what's your initial reactions to this, Boaz, then?
I've actually never watched The Shining before.
Oh, God,
Wow.
I was fearing this.
Yeah, so I've heard, obviously, like, tons and tons about The Shining, and I've seen it parodied a lot, and I know quite a bit about... I watched a documentary on the making of it, so I do understand, like, you know, how eccentric Stanley Kubrick was. But yeah, no, I've never actually sat down and watched it. I remember it was on one time when I was a kid, and it really freaked me out, so I just didn't really want to watch it. So I had that in the back of my head. But yeah, no, it's really, really good.
So, directing then, I do love how Stanley Kubrick uses music to prepare you that something weird is going to happen very soon. You know, when what we're seeing doesn't really suggest that at all, with this very like high-pitched tone, you know, that just gets louder and louder. You know, when Danny is talking to Tony, his imaginary friend, you see he looks very scared, and then cut to the blood coming out of the elevator, and a shot of the twins flashes up. And I love the first proper interaction with the twins where Danny is just playing darts and the music starts, then cut to the twins just standing there, you know, looking very creepy. You know, they look at each other and just walk off. You know, I just do love that style that Stanley Kubrick goes with, kind of just like messing with your expectations of what you're actually seeing on screen compared to what you're actually hearing. You know, I thought that was a really great move. And I think one of my favorite scenes of that is when the the creepy music starts and you have to wait to see what the weird stuff is actually a fake out one where Jack is throwing a tennis ball around the main hall, and Danny and Wendy are finding their way through the maze near the beginning, and it's cut together into cut scenes. But then Jack stops throwing the ball and looks down at a model of the maze.
Yes.
And then it cuts to a big bird's eye view of the actual maze with Wendy and Danny at the center. You know, the music builds and builds to a fake out to the title card Tuesday.
I thought that was brilliant because I thought that was the model maze that it was guiding the camera on. I thought that's just an incredibly clever transition, you know.
It's arguably like one of the creepiest scenes because, you know, it's very unnerving, that cut from Jack, you know, looking down at the maze to the bird's eye view of the actual maze. And you're like, he's not actually looking down at them, but in the back of your head, you're like, but is he though? Yeah. It's a very unnerving, weird cut, you know, and just genius, I find.
Well, it's very weird because the use of primary colors in this is prevalent. And you get the idea that they're really trying to make everyone like, I don't know, like a storybook character, or, you know, make them seem like they're kids. It's like that shot when he looks down at the maze really makes me feel like a Disney villain, you know, just looking down at his plan. You know, that could totally be the cover of a Disney film. And what's great about this is it is like they are playing with these colors and this idea of like children's books. But the stakes in this are incredibly high and they're horrifying. So I feel that this movie does a great job with that. With you get this idea that, oh, okay. And then absolutely not. It is not all right.
Yeah. And then, Kubrick intentionally plays with space as well in this. So, you know, one of the things that is supposed to kind of set you off from the beginning is that they're in this office with Ullman that has a window behind it. But his office is clearly an interior room of the hotel.
Right.
And like, there's no way that could actually have an outdoor window. So you weren't thinking about that maybe consciously when you're watching it, but it's enough to kind of give you a weird kind of feeling like you're kind of floating outside of it and being like, wait, what's going on? And the carpet, like I never forget that carpet.
How could you?
The orange carpet that Danny's riding the big wheel. on. And even sound wise, even beyond the music, like some of the sound things just really struck me this time when we watched it. When Danny's riding that big wheel and he goes over like the hardwood floor and then the carpet, and then the hardwood floor and the carpet. And there's something eerie about it because it has like this echoing.
It's kind of a weird rhythm to it, hasn't it? You know, loud then quiet, loud then quiet.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because I kind of noticed that like it does feel like it's almost like a musical piece, but it's just being played with, you know, it's a very sort of surreal thing. It does feel like notes. It's like
part of the score. Yeah,
it does feel like it's part of the score, but it's not. It's just him riding around the carpet. I thought that was like just amazingly incorporated, and it's just this one long shot as well.
Literally, when you were just humming it made me actually think about the score, and it made me think about the opening when we have, you know, these helicopter shots of Mount Hood. You know, it's like dur 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 dur.
That's true.
You know, so it's like, oh man, that is the score. You know, and so it's like you get the idea when you see these helicopter shots. It feels like evil spirits are watching Jack go to the house.
There's like an impending doom at all times, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, and that part where Danny's riding the big wheel is kind of the first time he sees those twins too, I think. And that's just super terrifying.
Oh, I can't stand it. It freaks me out. I mean, the last thing on that, the weird music, is Jack at the typewriter. Because him typing is like this very piercing, striking sound that echoes. And there is the brief pause. So it kind of mirrors Danny's big wheel tire sounds.
Yeah, they work with echo a lot too.
Everything is just playing the theme music, or it's playing some sort of haunted or orchestral play. But just everything's doing that. Not even just like, you know, the music itself, but just the house, just everything. I also really like when he first sees the little girls, like when he's like at the dartboard, the kids at the dartboard. And I just kind of like how that was done because it's I think all in one take. It's him at the dart, you know, he's throwing stuff. What's he throwing? He goes to pick the darts. Then he turns around and he sees something. And, you know, I think usually I would expect, okay, like it's the camera's going to zoom out or we're going to go from his perspective. But it kind of like pushes really close into Danny. It's like, it's pretty claustrophobic. You're like, whoa, okay. So you're like, okay, what the hell's going on? And then like moves to where Danny's looking and you see two little girls. And I think on the face of that, if he didn't do something so strange with the camera movements, you know, two little girls, like who cares? But it's like, okay, this is kind of ominous, you know.
It's horrifying.
There's one scene that actually kind of reminds me a lot of one of his previous films, Barry Lyndon, when Barry is kissing the girl, and it's all so slow. And I love the pacing a lot in a lot of Stanley Kubrick's films. And there's a similar thing here in when Jack enters room 237, and arguably the scariest scene in the film for me.
That's pretty horrible.
Is when you eventually see this beautiful naked lady is actually a rotting old woman. But I love it so much because it's so slow, like that Barry Lyndon scene. The way she opens the shower curtain and gets out of the tub, she takes her time, and Jack walks up to her really slowly. The pulsing loud music really keeps the tension up beautifully. You can't take your eyes off it at all. And when the rotting lady is like walking towards him after he discovers it, what she really looks like, it's terrifying. It's really terrifying. And what I found interesting as well is that you have these shots of the old lady rising from the bathtub as well, kind of cut together with the old lady walking towards him. So you're just like, hang on, what's actually real here? You know, doesn't kind of add up with the cutting of the continuity of the narrative. So it's very kind of scary and discombobulating as well. You're just like, oh my God, get out of that room, man.
Yeah, it's like sensory overload. You're so confused and afraid at the same time.
Well, they just really like to just throw you off because at that point, Jack Torrance looks absolutely insane. So it's like we go from, you know, we see the shot of the tub and we see the curtain and the woman comes out and it's like a model shoot, right? And so it's like, okay, we're watching a commercial. Then we cut back to Jack Torrance, who, like, no one should be around him. No one should be in a room alone with him, and you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen to this person?
Yeah, you think maybe she's in danger or something.
Yes. And then you're like, wait, she's interested in him? And you're like, no, she's not going to kiss this nasty guy. And then it's like, it gets flipped, but there's a lot of like stuff that's at play in here. Like, for instance, like you guys, I'm sure noticed at the very beginning of the movie, when Jack Torrance is there for the interview, he's in the lobby and he throws down the magazine that he's reading. He's actually reading Playgirl.
That's when they move in.
Is that when they move in? It's not the interview?
Scene,
okay,
yeah.
But yeah, he's in the lobby.
But he's reading a Playgirl magazine for some reason in the lobby of a hotel.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
They always want to throw us off.
I really like the slow build of that because of the noise and the music, and it's just one fixed shot. You're like, something's going to happen here. And, I thought maybe the woman is going to be some sort of horrific monster. All right, she's hot. Then you think Jack is a lunatic, so maybe she's in danger. And then, as you're right, it just keeps going, and it's like, okay, no, they're into each other. And then it's like, oh no, she is actually a hideous, decaying corpse. And you're like, whoa, okay. Yeah, that was pretty good, how that built onto itself.
And the laughing, when she's laughing, oh man, that sticks with you.
Yeah, that was pretty horrible. Yeah. So you were saying, like, intercuts. They do that quite a lot, like inserted cuts into a scene, particularly like some of the horrific ones. Like the one that really stuck to mind, I think the first time it happened, was the little girls, and he's looking at them, Danny is one of them. So he's looking at the little girls and on his big wheel, and then it's like, little girls, and then like a quick shot of like them dismembered on the ground, and then back to him looking at the little girls. I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, really quite disturbing, just kind of out of nowhere, and you're like trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, that's my favorite scene, actually. I find that really fascinating, those cuts, because it happens like 3 times, and in each flash you get to see the shot just a little bit longer each time, and it's like Stanley Kubrick is teasing you in a way, playing on like our dark human natured minds of wanting to see more of what happened to these girls. I just find it's very sneaky from Stanley Kubrick there. I don't know if you find that. It's
very like, what was that?
It's really interesting just how, the first one's really like short, and then the second one a little bit longer. You don't really notice it so much the first time you watch it, but then the more times you watch it, like, hang on, he's letting those shots linger a little bit too much, like in a good way, obviously, but do you know what I mean, guys?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Well, I like what he does with mirrors too. Like, there's a lot of mirror stuff that happens in like the Torrance's kind of little apartment bedroom. Both with, I mean, the first time I think we see it is the day that Jack oversleeps, and we see everybody else kind of getting things going, and he's still just sleeping. And then later, that's kind of where this red rum is murder is revealed, which is really interesting. And
so I think there are 2 really impressive things with that. One, how that shot, as you said, when he's waking up and it's from the point of view of a mirror. And you're like, okay, that's really interesting. And then that same mirror is there for the reveal, where, again, the camera is, like, at the mirror. She is aware, and then, she turns, and then the camera's at the mirror, and she gets something. But also just kind of how impressive it is, because, like, this is back a ways. Like, now, like, you would always be very careful not to do scenes in a mirror-filled environment, because you got a big cameraman and like boom operator. Like, I think that's him trying to like flex of just how great he is. Where
I'm just going off now.
Before you can just green screen them out or whatever, I'm gonna have the camera and everything go around a room with a mirror, and you're not going to see any of the crew. How did I do it? Sort of thing. I think. You don't even think about that because you think, oh, it's so seamless. But really think about that. How the hell did he where's the camera? There's a mirror everywhere. There's a mirror and another mirror. Where's the cameraman?
Technically, this movie is impeccable. And I mean, the cinematographer, John Alcott, the last movie he did with Stanley Kubrick was Barry Lyndon, where he won an Oscar. And this is the same person that also shot A Clockwork Orange. And he actually, what happened is the cinematographer on 2001, he had another job after 6 months. And so Alcott stepped in. So, I mean, this is a guy that really loves his job. I was reading an article in a cinematographer's magazine. It was an interview with him. And the way he details his process, I mean, it makes your head spin. And it's like, I didn't see the specific answer to your question of where is the camera, but I'll tell you, man, if anybody could do it, I mean, it's this crew. They could do it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little hole in the wall. I mean,
and it makes sense for Kubrick to pick impeccable people.
And maybe they're filming from like a hell of a distance. I don't know if it's like really powerful lenses. Maybe it's a hole from somewhere else and straight through. I don't know why you can't see the cameraman. It's just, to me, that boggles my mind. But
they put a camera inside of Jack Nicholson's eye socket, and that was
Terminator style.
That's the only explanation.
Yeah, that's it.
Jack Nicholson is a cyborg, and they just drill into his eyes. It makes sense now.
No actor is that good. Yeah.
Stanley's like, so Jack, what we're going to do, we're going to get you on the operating table. Take one of your eyes out. What?
Yeah.
I think, the last scenes are so good and pretty unrelenting, like where Wendy gets out of a few like close scrapes from Jack. I love the scene where Jack is like chopping down the doors, and I love the very simple directing where the camera just tracks the axe going back and forth, making it feel more powerful and scary. Later, when Danny escapes to the maze and Jack is chasing him, Wendy is kind of left on her own in the hotel, and the hotel is really pissed at this point, showing her dead skeletons from the past. Wendy sees a random guy in a bear costume giving a butler a blowjob. I don't know whether that was an accident by the Overlook Hotel. Like, whoops, that you weren't supposed to see that private moment for those guys. I think it's just a very different kind of disturbing scare for Wendy. And I think my favorite shot in the sequence is all like the blood coming out of the elevator doors. That is so scary for me because you know what's coming because we've seen it a few times already. So every time you see the elevator doors, I feel a bit uneasy and like, oh God, is the blood going to come out here? It's fantastic.
Yeah,
man, that is a lot of water as well.
Well, it said they did that a bunch of times, and he kept wanting more and more blood, and it's just like, whoa, because that is the image that sticks with me the most. I would say the blood from the elevator, and then the twin girls. Those are the two things that scare me the most. I mean, it isn't like traditional jump scares that get me in this.
No, it's
like when Jack Torrance goes into the gold room, and then all of a sudden there's this huge party going on. It's in full swing. There's a band. The bartender's there. That makes my skin crawl. Like there's no one's there.
Or anytime Lloyd is on screen at all. Lloyd is just so creepy.
He is so creepy. Yeah.
Very polite though, I think.
And they have him, well, the genius thing is like the bar is lit. So there's like this light coming up into Lloyd's eyes and face.
Yeah.
That creates shadows, that hang over. And Jack Nicholson kind of has the same thing.
I was going to say, like, he does seem like very skeletal without actually having that bone structure where you're just like, there's something off about you. You look like a skull somehow. And you look very pale. It's like, you're just unnerving. You look really unnerving. And he's just always smiling and really polite. But there's just something really off about him. Just so off.
Yeah.
Georgia, what's your favorite scene?
Oh gosh. Well, my favorite scene is probably, that's really hard to pick, but personally I have to go with when Danny / Tony like kind of fully loses it and is like yelling like Red Rob,
Red Rob.
That just scared the crap out of me. The first time I saw this I was like probably 15. I rented it from the video store and was watching it at my dad's house with my sisters.
The good old days.
And our VCR chose that moment to chew up the tape also.
Oh,
so,
no.
You're like in the middle, we're like so scared and freaked out. And then suddenly it's like, and we're like, what? It's like,
this is part of the movie.
It's like the movie was so scary it killed the VCR, but I just always remember just having that fear from that. And I think that, the kid that plays Danny, also named Danny, is really good. And just the idea of this, poor little kid who has had a pretty rough life at this point, kind of having this ability that he doesn't understand and being in maybe the worst possible place on planet Earth to have this ability. It's just, I really, that comes to mind to me a lot in that scene because he kind of just loses it there.
Boaz, your favorite scene or shot?
I think I'll go with the little girls, when he's on his trike.
Yeah, that's mine, yeah.
Yeah, and I do like the flash cut to, their brutalized corpses or whatever, It's a pretty good shot.
John?
Hey, I'm James Lovino, and I'm here to tell you about Alternate Sides, a movie podcast with a twist. I've worked in the film business for 2 decades, but I haven't actually seen that many movies, and this has been driving my frequent collaborator, Sam, a self-confessed film snob, crazy. So every week, while he's stuck in his car trying to avoid getting a parking ticket, thanks to New York City's alternate side parking regulations, we discuss a classic film I've finally just gotten around to seeing. Alternate Sides, a new podcast about movies, parking, and a 25-year friendship, wherever you get your podcasts.
My favorite scene, this is hard. Again, I have like a list of 90. Yeah. I would say, it's hard. All right, I'm going with this. Yeah. So I would say the scene where Halloran is talking with Danny and explaining the shine. Because Scatman Crothers is handling mountains of exposition, and he's doing it in a very measured manner. And it's like, I don't mind. I don't know how long that scene is, but he's giving us so much information, and I love it. Like, I mean, and the reactions that we get from Danny, amazing kid actor. It's just it's a spectacular scene to me. Like, all the work that Scatman Crothers did really popped to me this time more than any other time. I mean, he is fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I was also going to say I quite like where he first shines. They shine with each other, and like this, the camera follows him as he's talking to the parents, and that kind of his conversation with them sort of fades out, and you're like, "What's going on?" And like Danny's really looking at him, and the camera really pushes in on him, and you're like, "What is going on here?" And you still got this noise as well, this background noise. And then you've got like him just looking straight at him and like, "You want ice cream, don't you?" And you're like, "What the fuck?" That was a good build up to that, because you're like, something's going on here. It was like the payoff is he's telepathic.
Well, the misdirection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the misdirection, because you could be like, is something wrong with with that guy, or is he a ghost, or does he want to harm Danny? What is going on? And the payoff is, I've got telepathy or whatever. That was a good misdirect. I quite like that scene.
Directing score, Boaz. What should we go with for The Shining?
Should we go 9?
I think a very high 9.
Yeah? All right.
9.9? 9.8?
Wow. I hardly ever go that high. That is really high. Like, I think it would deserve it, but that is really high.
Come on, man.
Oh, come on.
9.7? 9.8? I think it's a masterwork.
It is a masterpiece, but I'm just so uncomfortable with that high. That's really high. Like, I've never ascended to those heights before. The view is very scary up there.
Are you fearing for your beloved There Will Be Blood at the top there?
Yeah. I think this is shot better than There Will Be Blood.
9.8, go on.
Oh, fuck it. No, 7. Let's just 9.7. Come on.
Okay, fine.
9.8. It just doesn't give me much, Yeah.
Final answer. Right, moving on.
Yeah.
Comfort film podcast.
We give it a 9.6. Again, we are nitpicking like mad, and the 0.4 that I pulled is not even really for on-screen issues. It's because I just personally know that he did like 127 takes of one scene, and I don't think that's necessary. And also because I know he like psychologically tortured the hell out of Shelley Duvall, and I don't think that's super cool. So I have to ding him a little bit for that. She is great, but yeah, I feel like there had to be a way to do that.
Yeah.
And I think just for the fact that there are like two very distinctive cuts to this film as well is a bit annoying. It does annoy me, director's cuts in general, so I understand them, but it's just
yeah. No, I mean, there's plenty of other scenes like I could go over that I really like. I just think it is directed like it's top notch. I like when she locks him into the storage room and how that's shot. Yeah. I like because like when he's knocked out and then it does a sort of fade cut. He does a few fade cuts and I think they're really well done where it just kind of fades from one scene to the other and then she's dragging him and then puts him in there. And I love how like he's banging on the door and the camera's like from under him and he looks just wild. And that cut with a kind of wide shot of her sort of cowering in the corner. I just thought that was all framed like so amazingly.
So screenplay then. I love the conversation that Dick Halloran has with Danny that you mentioned, John. He's explaining to him like The Shining and that people with that can talk to people with their minds and that you can see things that have happened in the past and the future, and that the Overlook Hotel is a bit like The Shining as well. And you're like, Dick is in complete control of the conversation, you would think. And then Danny just asks, what about room 237? And it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And Dick is a bit taken aback and is a little angry at Danny kind of thing and warns him and just says, stay out. And I just like how like one particular warning about one random room just kind of comes out of nowhere. And when, when you just beginning to learn about what The Shining is all about, then you kind of just have this thing that comes out of nowhere about room 237. I thought that was a great like plot bomb, if you will.
Oh yeah,
to come up there.
Yeah, especially like just how slow when he actually does get into the room that was, and like the door is just ajar open, and you've got the number in the key. I think there's even a scene prior where he tries to get into it, where he's like wiggling the handle. The setup for that is all really good, where it's like, got this, do not go into that room. He tries at one point when it's locked, and that's done so, like, creepily. And then when it's open and he still goes in, and you're like, you idiot, you bloody moron, get out of there.
Well, and then we also have that they don't actually show us what happens, and we've been waiting for this.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah, so it's like we just see the after effects, and we see he's been roughed up. And I mean, that... I mean, that scene is just like, holy shit, because it's like you have Danny, Wendy thinks that, Jack abused Danny.
Again.
Yes. Again. And then Jack is out of his mind. You can tell that like he is in the deepest, darkest place and he's thinking, oh, the world's totally against me now. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh my God, what are we going to do here?
Yeah, it's a good build of, it's like really good plotting.
It's excellent.
Yeah, I think I have to think about the screenplay in terms of it being adapted from a book, and I've read the book.
Yeah.
And I know that was kind of Stephen King's main contention, was that he didn't really like the characterization of Jack. But I actually think that, they made this choice to think of Jack instead of him being like a good guy who's trying not to do bad things. He's more of like a guy who's kind of innately not a great guy trying to quash that down more so.
I think you get the sense of that even from the first time you see him, like the fake smile, even when he's driving with his family and like answering questions that they're having. You can tell it kind of annoys him. Like he's like, why are they asking me these stupid fucking questions? But he's like smiling and just trying to play along. But you do feel like his family bloody irritates him. Just everything irritates him.
Yeah, and again, that then begs the question of why would they go with them to this isolated place where they can't get away? Because Wendy clearly does still feel threatened by him. The scene with like this doctor that comes to see Danny at the beginning because he's kind of passed out after a Tony episode. It's a great scene, and Wendy has this monologue where she explains how Danny had gotten his shoulder dislocated. And it's very much an abused spouse kind of making an excuse for her husband because he's trying to do better. And, that really sets us up from the beginning to know that this guy's pretty dangerous, or at least he has the capacity to be dangerous. And again, it would make me think, why are you going anywhere with this guy? Like, 4 months of sobriety, not quite enough to make me ready to go hole up for 6 months alone and out of touch with the world.
Well, denial is huge in this. That's okay. So we have Wendy's, monologue, which that is my favorite thing that she does in the movie because it's so well done and it's just her. And then, we also then go to the Overlook where Jack is being told about all the murders that happened there. And Ullman is just acting like it's no big deal. It's just like, it's like you can hang out in any room you want. And somebody here, just chopped up their entire family, stacked them in the corner. But you know what? You can eat as many hot dogs as you like from the fridge. And it's like, whoa, what? It's just like, we have this over and over. And again, Jack denies that he has the shining as well, because that's what happens. That's how he's able to see all this stuff. That's how he's able to go into 237. And that's why when he comes back after checking out the room, he says to Wendy, I didn't see a goddamn thing. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to deal with it.
He doesn't want to be seen as crazy. Pretty much the whole time, I think we see him kind of holding on to this facade that he really thinks he's selling, to Ullman or to his wife or whatever. But, clearly this guy's, tapped.
They're out of control.
I thought what was good is like where he's really trying to keep the illusion going when she asks like what progress he's made that day. And he's pissed off because he can't think of a goddamn thing. And she's coming, I've made progress. But you can see in his face, it's like, the smile comes late. It's like, it's great, But you can tell he's not feeling it. And she keeps prying. And then he just like, he's kind of laughing and joking, but then it just comes out of nowhere, like as he's laughing and joking. Do you know every time you come in here, you fuck up, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I've got something down and you fuck up my day. Like, if you hear me typing like this, get the fuck out of the room, get the hell out of here. I just love how it kind of very...
she's just trying to be nice and just...
Yeah, he's like really trying to be nice and then it just like slips away and he's just like, get the fuck out of my room.
Yeah.
So you can tell like he's not playing with a full deck and he's trying hard. It does feel like he's trying hard to pretend he's okay. But it's just not working, and
failing miserably.
Yeah, and you do feel like she should just not bother him. Like she should run away. She should get the hell out of there.
Oh yeah. Well, the scene where he like is talking to her, it ties in. It comes back from when he's been to 237. He's talking to Wendy. It seems like they're actually connecting as a couple for a second,
which they rarely do. I think, they often aren't really talking to each other, but just like at each other.
No, and he seems like he has real emotions and he cares. Yeah. And then as soon as she suggests that they should leave the hotel, that I think is the scariest explosion.
That's a huge turn. Yeah. Because he goes from feeling like maybe things can be okay to instantly feeling like she is undermining his authority as like head of the family. and, undercutting, his abilities and saying he can't do anything except menial labor and types of things like this. In a real way, too. Not in a supernatural way, but in like a, real living with an abuser type scary.
Yeah, like he could definitely beat the crap out of her, like right there and then.
Yeah, well, you definitely get the feeling that has been something that has occurred many times. And it's horrifying.
You don't know the full extent of it. I think one scene I find really interesting and makes the Overlook Hotel feel like an actual character in the movie is when like Jack enters the gold room for the second time and there's the 1920s like 4th of July party going on, and Jack orders a drink and wants to pay for it, and Lloyd says, "Your money's no good here. Orders from the house." And then Jack says, "I'm the kind of man who likes to know who's buying their drinks, Lloyd." And then Lloyd says, "It's not a matter that concerns you, Mr. Dorrance. At least not at this point." And it's like Jack will soon know that when he's dead. It just definitely gives me this sense that the Overlook is a proper character in this movie and is trying to manipulate all these characters, in different ways, and certainly Jack the most. And
definitely.
He can buy as many drinks as he wants when he's dead, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or is he dead already?
It's like the Hotel California. Now that I think about it.
That's funny.
You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Yeah.
Well, and all the people look dead. That's something that I really noticed this time as well. Like, I mean, Grady, right? We don't get a close-up of him, and then they're in the bathroom, and all of a sudden we go to this close-up of him, and it is the palest, deadest face, and he's got that little red.
He is so pale.
Yeah, and you're like, oh god, like
that's creepy.
Yeah, like you think Lloyd is terrifying, right? Because he has that the red jacket. There's something that's like, okay, you're the devil. I got it. And then we go back with Grady, and you're like, well, if that was the devil, this is worse. I don't know what you are. And him talking about correcting them. Woof.
I think it was also good how they built up to him being creepier than Lloyd, because when the first ghost you see is Lloyd, and he is very creepy and unnerving, where you're like, Jack, are you even seeing this? Are you seeing this bartender in front of you? Like, this guy is the most creepy man on the face of the earth. Like, how can you be okay with this? But then when you see Grady, it kind of makes more sense. Like, he accidentally bumps into him, he gets all this stuff. Very apologetic, really submissive, like just a very professional butler, takes him in. He's being very caring, very nice, doing small talk. And he seems like a regular guy. So I was like, what the hell's he doing here? But then when Jack clocks on, where he's like, hang on a minute, you're the previous caretaker. And he's still being very innocent. I have no idea what you're talking about, sir. I'm the butler. Right. And then he just keeps pushing it, and he just gets creepier, where you're just like, he just comes from a place where he's like the most ordinary thing in this film to he just gets weirder and weirder the more he talks, where you're like, okay, this guy is creepier than Lloyd. But I think because he started like just so normal that when he ups that creep factor, you're like, whoa, okay, this guy is really, really creepy. That's a really great scene,
Yeah, because he seems low status.
Yeah, very low status. And then at the end, it's like he is basically like commanding Jack. He's like, they need correction. You're like, whoa, Jesus.
It's interesting you don't see him like behind the freezer door as well. I think that is very, very deliberate. Like, there's no actual physical being like that he's talking to behind that door.
Yeah,
that's very much just a voice. I find like Danny's imaginary friend Tony really interesting, and I feel like Tony is like the Overlook talking to Danny in a way, trying to manipulate him using The Shining. That's how I kind of read it. Or it could be like The Shining itself trying to warn Danny about, murder. But he just, and he just says it backwards. It could be read in many different ways, where Danny is trying to fight the Overlook Hotel in his head while he's saying red rum all the time. So it's just really interesting how that just, that could be interpreted. How do you guys see Tony in this film?
Tony, I think, is really there to protect Danny, because we learn that Tony shows up as a result of trauma after Jack dislocated his arm. It's like it's a very scary situation. The home life is not good. Anytime that we see like a one-on-one scene, I mean, I can only really think of one off the top of my head, aside from when he's trying to murder him, is that very creepy scene in the bedroom with Danny. And it doesn't seem like emotionally there's really any connection between them at all, except like fear, anger, distrust. It doesn't feel safe. And it's like he's in this a very abusive place, and he needed, something else to help him make it through. And since there wasn't a physical person, I feel like Tony showed up to be like, okay, when things get too real, I'm here for you, and we're going to make it through.
Okay.
And then it's like but it has more to it than that, because then Tony has this ability to see and hear things and give Danny, these visions.
Yeah, heads up. Yeah.
I think Danny uses Tony as it's like a compartmentalization tool.
Yes.
Wendy characterizes this as his imaginary friend, but it's more like, to me, that Danny has this ability that he doesn't understand. And the only way that he can make it make sense is to imagine it as some entity separate from himself who tells him things. Because he knows he knows these things, but he doesn't understand how he's learning them. So the easiest way to do that is to create this Tony who tells him these things, and that's how he knows. He knows the Overlook is bad. It's not because he senses it himself, it's because Tony told him. But really, we know as adults that Tony is just kind of his way of understanding his ability.
Well, and it's also like, Jack Torrance is, that's his dad, and that's where that gift came from. It didn't come from Wendy. So Wendy doesn't have a way to really help him nurture that or understand it.
And Jack has been drinking it down.
Exactly.
So it's like, I think Dr. Sleep is a sequel book to The Shining, and there's a film of that as well. Yeah. And it ties in really closely to this film. And we find out a lot more about, Jack in that book, and how Jack maybe had abilities that he, didn't explore or wasn't able to explore because, people are just going to think you're crazy. They're going to think you have schizophrenia or something. If you hear voices, that's not normal. So you find ways to make the voices be quiet.
When, you're first introduced to Tony and he does the little finger thing, I'm Tony to his mother. And I thought, okay, that's a bit weird, And then when he's talking to himself about if his dad got the job. I really like that, because that was like, did he get the job? Yeah, he got the job. We're going to, the hotel or whatever. And I thought that was really weird. And so for the first, bit, you think, okay, is Tony like an actual entity? And I think it's also weird that he puts like a pretty freaky voice for him. It's like, it's a pretty scary voice for a kid.
Yeah.
And then even with the mother scene where he like picks up a knife and he's Tony and then writes Red Rum, I thought, that's pretty ominous. That's pretty bad. But I do agree. I think that's kind of just set up to be like incongruous in your head. Like his alter ego has this like really weird way of speaking, and he acts very strange. But it is definitely a good personality, and I don't think it's a real spirit. It's just the way he can cope with this or comprehend this. But yeah, the setup of that is pretty good. Where it does seem like this Tony personality is kind of a bit ominous as well, but it's definitely a good thing.
I do feel like there is a little bit of ambiguity there, that the house is kind of could be communicating with him.
I think there is some ambiguity that you could say maybe it's a different entity or something.
Certainly in those later scenes where he's like, Danny's not here, Mrs. Torrance, when she's trying to talk to him. So yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, what do we think of that last shot where, we see that Jack is in the photograph? I feel like it's the Overlook trying to mess with us, because otherwise, like, any of the theories you come up with, it could be just unsatisfying, or you just get tied up in knots. Like when you see Jack, in the photo, from the 1920s party. I mean, what do we think of that?
I think that he got seduced by the house, and he loved the house from the second that he got there. And they make a point to say that. And they also, they give us little hints. For instance, Grady says, "You've always been the caretaker here." So it's like it raises the question of, was he here before? I don't know. Personally, what I think is that the house liked him and was like, okay, here we go. And they got him. And I feel like he, when he died there, he officially became part of this Overlook Hotel group of ghosts. And this is like, his triumph, honestly, is that like, hey, I died, I lost my family, but I am having a great time at the Overlook with all these famous people, because he looks like he's having a blast, and it makes us cringe.
Yeah. I think maybe it does feel like they're eternally in the 1920s, that particular party, for the rest of time.
Yep.
Probably, I would even think, you might get an insight into that, because Grady, until he's kind of challenged on it, doesn't really remember like being human and living in the 20th century. Late 20th century. It's like he's like, I've always been here. What are you talking about? It's only when he's like pushed is it like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, no, I came here recently. Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough. But I think the hotel just tricks you into thinking you've always been celebrating in this 1920s party when you're dead.
Well, it also reminds me of like a Los Angeles thing where like it's funny because like in LA, one of the things I've noticed is there are so many secrets with people, and people don't want to be forthcoming. So if you were in this Overlook Hotel group and it was really great, you really don't want to give up the secrets of it. You don't want to say that, to become a part of this, you have to kill your family, be crazy. I mean, I know he eventually commands them to do it in the very same scene, but I kind of feel like he doesn't want to lay the cards on the table until he knows that Jack is all in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he needs him to understand that, there's a price of admission. It's not like you just roll up in the gold ballroom and have a drink with Lloyd and you're part of the team. Like, you have to like buy your way in. And the hotel really wants Danny, because Danny has the super powered shining ability.
Yeah.
But they can't get Danny because that ability, that's ironically the thing that they want the most, is also preventing them from getting to him, because he can kind of push them out. So they want Danny, and they'll go through Jack to get him.
I agree that, the hotel definitely kind of wants Danny and Jack, and that they've kind of like, in the end when he does die, it's like, yeah, he's part of this ghost family now in the photograph, where it kind of represents it at the end. But certainly when he sees Lloyd in those scenes where he's having a drink with him, you get the sense that he knows him already.
Yeah,
that they have a history there already. So
yeah, I did find that a bit weird. Like, how did he know his name? And also, why didn't it surprise him? Like, is the hotel messing with his mind a bit here and his memory? Because he is completely fine with there just being inexplicably a bartender down here. It does seem like something that you would question, Yeah,
I do feel like when you've got a handle on a theory, you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't work because of something else,
Yeah.
So I just love how clever this film is, that it will trip you up somewhere when you think you've worked it out, but no, there's something else. That doesn't make sense.
But also, I was even thinking, like, do they really like want Danny, or is it just maybe his shining is a threat to the house? I don't know. It's never, they never flat out say, but do they want the shining power, or do they want to like get rid of it? Is it like a threat to the house? I don't know.
Well, that's kind of just the beauty of this film, is that a lot of things are left unexplained, and these are very much the films I really enjoy. Is that the audience has to work really hard to figure out all these theories, and certainly The Shining, and a lot of like 2001, and they're just so enjoyable to watch that you don't get all the answers. You get more questions.
Yeah, I do feel there are answers there. It's just you have to do detective work.
You have to watch it 100 times.
Yeah.
Favorite lines, people? I think mine is definitely like a very like menacing and one from Jack when he's walking up the stairs and he says, "Wendy, darling, light of my life. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains in. I'm going to bash them right the fuck in."
Yeah.
It's so horrible
like
and
that.
menacing. And Jack Nicholson, it's just impeccable there for me. What's your favorite lines, people?
I liked another. I mean, Jack Nicholson's delivery of practically everything in this is like the perfect marriage of an actor and a line. I enjoyed it when he had his first drink again with Lloyd, and he says, "Here's to 5 miserable months on the wagon and all the irreparable harm it's caused me." I mean, it just shows you, like, this is what I said from the beginning when we were watching it. Like, when they're in the car and he's just being such a dick to Wendy and Danny, it's like, this is a dry drunk. Like, that's, I don't know if that's a saying you guys have heard, but like, this is an alcoholic who is very unhappy with not being, with being on the wagon. He's still an alcoholic, even though he's not drinking. And he's just kind of a miserable person. And this is when he finally kind of is in a safe space where he can admit that and can say, like, I'm miserable from not drinking, and I'm so psyched to be back off the wagon.
John?
Just going with a classic here. I'm going with Here's Johnny.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was actually in the script or in the book, or if it's just something he said. I like to think it's just something that Jack Nicholson decided to say, because that makes me smile.
Well, we've seen that behind the scenes shot of him kind of getting amped up for that scene.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it's really interesting. If you haven't seen that, go like find it somewhere. But they show kind of Jack Nicholson getting psyched up, and he's just kind of like jumping up and down and holding the axe.
Yeah, he's practicing the axe moves, and he's like, axe, murder, kill. And you're just like, oh, wow. So it's just like, so when they went, he was ready to go. One of the things that I read online, and it was like, then people were like, no, it's not true. But I don't know. Let's say it is. So what I found online was they talked about him actually working as a firefighter.
Yeah, I've heard this.
You've heard this? Yeah. And so I went and I looked into it, and it said that he had some kind of training course that he completed at the Van Nuys airport, and that he would, I don't know if he would work there as a volunteer, what the situation was. But the bottom line is he had some training as a firefighter. So him taking down that door, is looks so good because he really knows how to use an axe and do that.
Yeah. And it's not like a fake door or a constructed door. It's like it's a real door. It's He just has the muscle to do that. But yeah, I have heard that he was a volunteer firefighter. He had a firefighting course, so he could just do that. I don't know how many doors they probably went through. Probably like fucking 800 doors.
A lot.
Just every single door in the hotel.
Because Kubrick wanted to do like 68 takes probably or something.
I bet. Well, they said that the part, I don't know if it's real, is they said that the doors were too easy for him to knock down. So they had to give him thicker doors to do it.
That's pretty cool. I think that's pretty good. That sounds like it should be true. And also, that's a really good flex for Jack Nicholson. If he just says in a film, did you know, they actually had to make the doors thicker because I'm just that fucking badass. I just kept smashing them in one hit.
Favorite line, Boaz?
I love the line that you said as well, the one where he's bashing her brains in. I think I'll go with that one, mainly because it's not the line itself, but it's the delivery where he looks at Lloyd. I think it's probably the first time you see Lloyd, and he's like, hi, Lloyd. He goes, little slow tonight, isn't it? And then he just laughs like a maniac. He's like, little slow tonight, isn't it? Or something like that. I can't do it. But it's it's so deranged. It's so really weird. And it just sticks in my head. I just love how he does that.
Well, you can really see the origins of his Joker and the Tim Burton Batman in this.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I was like, oh, wow. And I adore the Tim Burton Batman. And it also makes me think about like Witches of Eastwick, where he literally played the devil years later.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow, all of this kind of launched from this. Yeah, I mean, he does everything in this.
I think this definitely showed that he had the chops for a really good villain.
Screenplay score, Boaz. What should we go for? 9.7. I again really just it's so good though.
It is really good.
It's so good. Or a bit lower.
I'd still probably very high. Maybe just like a straight 9.
9.4
then. 3.
Okay, 9.3. There you go. Hard man to please people.
We're still talking about 9s here, though. It's like, come on, if I were that harsh,
John and Georgia, what are you going for?
Yeah, we thought the screenplay was pretty much flawless. I took off like a very smidge little point, like 0.2, for the fact that I really don't love that Halloran goes through all the trouble of getting to the Overlook and then gets murdered the instant he walks in the door. So for that reason, we gave it a 9.8. But this is real close to a 10 for me. I think it's just almost perfect.
Well, it started as a 10, and then it was like, I was like, we can't give it a 10. And then it was just like, what are we going to do?
Really nitpicking.
Yeah, we dug down. Yeah, like the little bits. But we have the same thing going as you guys. We're like, ooh.
So, acting then. I love the acting from Jack Nicholson when Jack's having a nightmare and Wendy wakes him up.
Yeah, that was good.
And he looks incredibly scared.
Yeah.
And he says he had a dream about killing Wendy and Danny and that he chopped them up into little pieces. And then Danny approaches looking shell-shocked and Wendy sees if he's okay. And then we see Jack, as if it's the end of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. His face is hanging from all expression, like The Shining has complete control over him in that moment. It's quite an extraordinary shot of his face, just like completely just void of anything, really. It's quite extraordinary, that bit.
I mean, that stuck out to us, too. I mean, that just, the work that came out, and I really noticed this time just how worked up he was from that dream. And Jack Nicholson, phenomenal actor, probably my favorite. But these more like really tender, personal moments where he really exposes his feelings, that's not traditionally what we know him for. But when he came out of that dream, man, he just had like tears in his eyes and he looked gone. He looked like he had seen the worst thing in his life. And I was just like, wow. This guy, I mean, everything.
Absolutely. I definitely would say it's like his most sympathetic part in the film where you're like, oh, I'm kind of caring for him. And it's great where it comes in because he's already been acting creepy before that scene and kind of like he's only just holding back his anger. And then you have a scene where he's actually quite fragile, where you're like, oh, okay, shit, okay. He's pretty sad. Okay, this is a little strange. But yeah, that's really good. I do enjoy that too.
Well, it's perfect because he's an abusive personality. And a person that is that horrendous then gives you that. We're like, oh, I feel bad for him. You'll let him come at you again.
Suckers you in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that brings to mind Shelley Duvall. I think Shelley Duvall is kind of underrated in this because she has to, I mean, okay, the Wendy from the book is a lot stronger of a personality than the Shelley Duvall Wendy, which I know is a Kubrick choice. It feels like he had her play, this woman who's clearly been in an abusive relationship for quite a while, and she's kind of beaten down. And poor Shelley Duvall has to like be crying in like 90% of her scenes, and she does it every time, and I never don't believe it. So I think that, she manages this super intense emotion quite a bit. And, she's also worried about her son. So there's never there's maybe 2 moments in this movie where she feels like happy or safe, when she's playing with Danny outside in one of the early scenes. And she does have kind of a childlike kind of thing. John, I think you had mentioned, like, they've always got her in the beginning dressed in like primary colors and, even like a yellow jacket that has like cartoony looking things on it, and she seems very young and very innocent. And she has like a little hint of a Southern accent too, which I think kind of makes her seem like more innocent and out of her element in a way. And, I think she did a really good job the whole way through with managing to have different intensities to the same type of emotion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because you talk about them playing outside. When Wendy and Danny are playing outside, that's one of the parts that always makes me laugh, because I love in this movie how we start out where it's like a month later. Then we go to the days. Then by the end, we're at hours. And that particular part is Thursday. And so you see Thursday, and then you see Wendy and Danny outside having a great time. And then you cut inside to Jack Nicholson, like shaggy face, unshaven, this black sweater, and he's got his head tilted down. He's staring out, and he looks like death.
Yeah, I love that shot.
And you're just like, oh my God, like that's it.
He's just furious for apropos of absolutely nothing. Like, I mean, I have to imagine maybe he was trying to write and it just isn't coming to him or something, but it's just like he's possessed by evil at that point already.
And he hates people that are having fun, because it's like, oh, they get to have a vacation. And you know what I mean? It's just like, it's heavy. So Thursday. Thursday.
Tough day.
Yeah, it very much feels like a Jonathan Demme close-up shot. It reminds me a lot of those very iconic shots in Silence of the Lambs of Anthony Hopkins when he's got his head tilted down but his eyes are pointed straight forward. Yeah. That brought me straight back to that film. And like there's some weird kind of like subtle movements in his face in that shot as well, which is very creepy if you notice very, very carefully. Favorite performance for me is Jack Nicholson for sure. Georgia, what's your favorite performance?
I mean, I feel like you kind of have to go with Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
I really don't think there are really any bad performances in this movie, though. Like, we talked about it and went through just like every single person down to the guy, Bill, or whatever his name is, who's sitting in the office with Ullman, and I don't even know if he talks.
Yeah.
But he played Pontius Pilate and Jesus Christ Superstar.
Barry Dennen.
Yeah, and he's good. Like, just his reaction shots are good.
He has that one where he's horrified.
Yeah. And but I think that, Scatman Carruthers is fantastic. Again, Shelley Duvall is great. Kid actors can make or break a movie.
Yeah, for sure.
And this kid was really, really good. But Jack Nicholson is like, this is the person you remember. Like, when I'm going through what line did I like, what scene did I like, it's really Jack Nicholson just keeps popping to mind because it is like a bravura kind of performance. Like, he leaves it all out there.
It's very hypnotic. Like, you can't help but just focus on him.
Is that your favorite as well, Boaz and John, Jack Nicholson?
Oh, yeah, I would say so.
Absolutely.
We're all across the board picking Jack Nicholson. Yeah, he's my favorite as well. I think just that final like slow chase up the stairs, I just find extraordinary. Where it's just very much a mix of like maniacy with comedy kind of, but with like straight anger as well. And there's kind of just like an amalgamation of all that when he's on the stairs. And there's just this weird like flick of his tongue as well. Like he's completely immersed into this crazy maniac role.
And he's like grabbing at her in a weird way too.
Yeah.
And grabbing at the bat. And it's just nutty. He's crazy.
It's almost like he's letting things happen naturally within his character.
The tongue thing, I don't get though.
He does that multiple times.
Yeah, I don't know what the tongue thing means. I watched him, like, I don't know, but I'm watching it.
You're going with it.
Yeah.
Acting score, Boaz, what should we go for? 9s again?
Yeah, right. 9.5.
Yeah, I'm happy with 9.5. I think everyone is pretty extraordinary in this, especially the kid Danny as well.
Yeah, Danny is
as
really
you said,
good.
Georgia, like kid performances can either break or make your movie, and he's great too. So yeah, I'm very happy with a 9.5.
Oh, I was going to say one scene that I would have said in direction that I quite liked, but you could say it with acting as well. Like when his friend Carruthers, when he gets like killed by Jack, and then they do the cut of like Danny, he's felt that as well. Like, he's seen this old man get killed, and he looks horrified like that. But it's really intense, and it just keeps cutting back between this kid doing a really traumatized expression, and kind of shaking, and this old guy dying by Jack. I thought that was really good.
Well, I just want to build on that, because that face that Danny makes when he's scared, this was crazy. Jack Nicholson makes that face when he's in room 237. He does the same face, and he's shaking his head. And Wendy does it too. All three of them do it.
Ooh, that's weird.
And I was like, wow. Yeah, the first time I caught that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I want to just watch this film again after we record.
Right?
I need to see all these other details.
Yeah, 0.2 to the speed, and just get everything. Just frame by frame, individual frames.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen this so many times. I mean, when we first bought a flat screen TV, it was like a million years ago.
Yeah.
We got The Shining and a Blu-ray player. The first Blu-ray we bought was The Shining, because that's the first movie we wanted to see in high def. And then we've gone to see it at the theater, because they've had screenings of it here in LA, and we've gone to see it because we were
so lucky.
too young when it came out. But yeah, that was an awesome experience. So, and I would go see it in the theater again.
Oh yeah.
Even because the opening scenes, the helicopter scenes over, the mountains are so awesome.
Yeah.
In a big format.
Yeah.
It's like IMAX or something. It's just awesome.
Well, this is the first time that I caught, when they're at the overlook, you actually, at the very top of the frame, can see the edge of the helicopter blades. That's the first time I caught it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, this is our first time doing the 4K, The Shining. So it was we saw even more little bits.
Stanley Kubrick is going to rise from the grave to fix that probably now.
He saw what? Take back your Oscar, Alcott.
He'll find a way.
Yeah, right?
He always does. Acting score, guys. What are you going for acting?
Well, we were going to say 9.4, but you wanted to fight with me on it.
I do, because it's hard. Here's the reason that, one of the reasons that we kind of went back and forth is because there's some of all of these people are a 10 as actors. Some of the acting choices sometimes I'm not so sure about.
What, the tongue thing? Is that one? The tongue thing on the steps?
No, I can accept that. I can accept that because he's in it. It's not that I don't buy it. The problem that I run into sometimes is in this movie, they use a lot of long takes, which I adore, because you really get to see the people work. But, if you're take 80 and we're doing a long take again, and you don't know what they want from you, you're going to start doing anything. So it might not be necessarily related to the scene and your relationship with the other character. It might be unnerving, right? And you'd be like, whoa, this is creepy. But if you look at it in terms of logic, in terms of the character relationship, you might be like, not sure. So that was my kind of gripe. But even with that, I feel like it's not on the actor. I feel like that was a Stanley Kubrick thing saying, do this, we're taking this.
All right. Well, if you want to pop it up a point, we can go to 9.5.
All right, 9.5.
All right.
All right.
So I feel like Stanley Kubrick is very much one of these directors where he has an incredibly clear vision of what he wants to see in the shot.
Yeah.
And if that is not achieved, they go again. There's something, just the smallest thing not right, they go again. He's one of those guys.
It's like your cheek is moving 2 millimeters to the left when it should be to the right. Yeah, but I have heard the making of this. I think it was some fact that where she just walks up the steps It's like just a couple of steps. They did that so many times that, you know, if that was a staircase, it would be like walking up the Eiffel Tower or some shit like that. Like, they just did it again and again, just these couple of steps again and again and again. You think that's crazy?
Yeah, like, I mean, that was why I dinged him a little in directing, because I feel like if you want somebody to redo something just that you didn't get exactly what you wanted, then find a way to explain what you want so that the person doesn't have to do it 127 times.
Well, it's funny.
Just having acted and directed,
right?
I would never like force somebody to do that so many times because I'm not communicating well enough. That's just where I feel.
Yeah. Maybe he just doesn't know what it is that he wants, but he knows when he sees it. It's like, I'll know it when I see it. Just keep doing it.
And that happens a lot. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like, with acting, like I'm used to getting specific notes or like, don't turn your head here or say this, or, you know, I'm down for all that. It's just like, this is okay. I'm in no way, let's be super clear, and no way even putting myself remotely close to Jack Nicholson. But once I knew somebody who was a director who wanted to do that scene, that Wendy scene, I'm going to bash your brains in thing. And so we went and we did it. And I got to tell you, man, he wanted to do it in one take. So it was just the camera followed us around. Okay. And it was just like to do that whole thing emotionally. Oh my God. Like we did it, I think maybe 8 times. Okay. And I was toast. And I'm like, wow. I mean, these people, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Like over 100 times to like do these really intense long takes. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, you've just got to think you must be completely drained after a day, like all of these actors. Just like, how is there anything left in the tank, you know? How is he able to do as good as he did, you know?
Well, I think that's when you really get the strange kind of choices that might come out because you just aren't even thinking anymore. You're like, hey, why not? You know?
Yeah. I mean, that being said, it obviously worked for Stanley Kubrick. Because he made a very small handful of films, all of which are pretty much, you know, in everybody's top 100 or whatever. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
Right, let's add up the scores then for The Shining. And The Shining gets 57.4.
Ooh, that's pretty.
And yes, of course, you're wondering whether it beat The Mist. And yeah, it did. With that one only got 46.1. No, what you're clearly wondering is it top of our list? And it goes second. There Will Be Blood is still at number 1, Boaz. You can breathe.
That's interesting.
It's fine. You can relax now.
Yeah, I think maybe I've subconsciously sabotaged our scores here.
With 9.3 for the screenplay.
Yeah, I do like There Will Be Blood though.
Right. So next episode, as Don't Worry Darling is coming out in the cinemas. Very excited for that one. Olivia Wilde's second film, I believe. And of course that stars Florence Pugh. So we'll be having a look at Florence Pugh films. And we'll hopefully have guests for that one again from One of Us Is Bored podcast as our guest. Guys, Comfort Film Podcast, you have been incredible. You really know your stuff. It's been so fascinating and amazing hearing your thoughts on both these films. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. We loved it.
Yeah. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. You guys are good.
Yeah, no, it was really great.
Again, like, where can we find you on the old podcast?
Yeah, so you can find our podcast on anywhere podcasts are pretty much, but most people listen to us on Apple or Spotify. You can also find us on Instagram. Mostly that's where we're active on socials at Comfort Films Podcast. And join us there. Let us know what your comfort films are that you want to see us talk about. And yeah, thanks for letting us join you and talk about a couple of very not comforting films for a change.
It's good to feel bad, guys. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's good to be scared and not happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, you could take a look if you want to see some of the essays we do on some of the films we talk about on the Comfort Films Podcast. Please go to comfortfilmspodcast.com. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us outside your front door.
No, probably not.
Just outside the covers when you're asleep. Like, gently stroking your head.
It's goodbye from the Comfort Film Podcast, John and Georgia. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
And it's goodbye from our red rum loving Boaz. Bye-bye.
Here goes Johnny.
And it's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye. That's it for part 2. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 1 if you haven't done so already. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell us what your favourite films are relating to the episodes. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for Twitter at FVF_podcast. If you do, we'll give you a shout out on the next episode. If you're feeling really generous, you can buy us a one-off coffee at our Buy Me a Coffee account. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.